Lieutenant Anya Volkov lay motionless in the snow, a shallow, self-dug depression her only concealment. The temperature was 0, the kind of biting cold that extracted heat from the body with predatory efficiency. She was an observer, positioned 300 meters from a critical enemy logistics hub. Her mission? Sustained, passive surveillance. She had been in the snow for 11 hours, every muscle screaming a protest that she systematically silenced. Her fingers and toes were numb, the first insidious stage of hypothermia setting in, a risk she had calculated and accepted. Her breathing was so shallow and controlled that a spider could have spun a web across her nostrils without her disturbing it. True power, she knew, was not an act of aggression, but an act of absolute, prolonged self-mastery. She was defined not by her weapon, but by her stillness, the quality of her silence in a world demanding noise.
The internal battle was fiercer than any external threat. The cold was a constant, eloquent adversary, using pain and lethargy to negotiate surrender. It urged movement, a simple shift of weight, a flex of the cramped muscles, any action that would betray her position. Anya countered the temptation with ritualistic mental discipline. She performed internal body scans, starting at her toes, moving slowly up to her head, checking the status of each muscle group. If a muscle twitched, she sent a cold, controlled command to relax. She focused on the minutiae, the texture of the snow pressed against her cheek, the faint smell of oil on her rifle barrel. This intense, granular focus on the immediate objective reality choked out the subjective sensation of pain and discomfort. She was a statue carved from ice and will, her consciousness a single unblinking eye focused on the target.
She knew the enemy relied on the certainty of human weakness. They expected the observer to shift, to scratch an itch, to give in to the profound misery of the static position. Her endurance was an operational weapon, her stillness a form of strategic deception. The smallest movement in this pristine, white landscape would be a colossal failure. Her professional honor demanded perfection. She recalled the words of her instructor, "The silent sentinel holds the line where the brave men fail. Honor is paid in unmoving hours." She repeated the quote, silently aligning her will with the demands of the code. She was the sentinel, and her post was the frozen ground. She was aware of the throbbing ache in her lower back, a consequence of the awkward static posture, but she treated the ache as a measure of the time remaining, not a reason to move.
The wind shifted, bringing the faint smell of wood smoke and human activity from the enemy camp. The scent was a psychological challenge, a reminder of the warmth and rest she was denying herself. She used the smell as an intelligence cue, confirming the wind direction and the ongoing activity level. She filtered all sensory input through the lens of mission necessity. Her mind was a tactical computer. Input, cold. Output, conserve energy, focus on breathing. Input, fatigue. Output, recite operational code, maintain stillness. She had eliminated the emotional processing layer, transforming subjective experience into objective data. Her discipline was the continuous internal choice to prioritize the mission's integrity over her body's comfort.
A small rabbit, unaware of her presence, hopped close to her head, its dark eyes mirroring the frozen landscape. The sudden, innocent movement was almost enough to break her concentration. She held her breath, not daring to shoo it away, knowing that even a ripple of movement would compromise her position. The rabbit sniffed the air, then hopped over her leg, its tiny weight barely disturbing the snow. This micro-event was a profound test of her focus. She let the panic of proximity pass, maintaining her rigid stillness. This was the geometry of stillness, occupying space without possessing it, merging with the environment to the point of non-existence.
She had to be less conspicuous than the rabbit. After an hour, the rhythmic drone of a convoy approached the hub. This was the moment of maximum stress, demanding precision and speed. Anya's mind immediately shifted from passive stillness to active observation. Her focus sharpened to a razor edge, her eyes glued to the scope, recording every detail: license plates, vehicle types, cargo indications, personnel numbers. Her fingers, despite the cold, worked with professional efficiency on the small digital recorder, meticulously logging the data. This was the payoff for the hours of suffering, the ability to perform a complex, high-stakes task under extreme physical duress. She was fully effective, not just enduring.
A new challenge emerged. One of the sentries, bored and stamping his feet against the cold, walked directly toward her position, kicking idly at the snow. He was 30 meters away, then 20. Anya felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, but her training immediately damped it down. She did not raise her rifle. She did not panic. She reduced her world to her breath, making it shallower, slower, matching the rhythm of the sentry's heavy boots. She was now relying entirely on her camouflage and the quality of her stillness. Her mind was cold and calculating. Her only chance was to be non-existent. Any proactive move would lead to an immediate, failed engagement.
The sentry stopped 5 meters from her head, his shadow falling across her position. Anya could hear the man whistling a simple, monotonous tune. She could smell the cheap tobacco on his uniform. This was a moment of absolute vulnerability, a test of pure, passive endurance. Her heart rate, through sheer mental force, remained steady, slow. She was consciously controlling the tremor in her hands, keeping them perfectly positioned on her rifle and recorder. She was fighting a chemical battle against her own body's survival instincts. The ultimate test of discipline is the ability to wait for the enemy to walk away. She waited, not for her relief, but for the sentry to complete his unpredictable random patrol. The sentry finally moved off, his whistle fading into the distance. Anya did not immediately move or relax. She held the rigid position for another 5 minutes, a crucial operational buffer against the possibility of the sentry doubling back to check the area. Only when the silence returned, a silence she could feel was genuine, did she allow herself a slight, microscopic readjustment of her helmet. The relief was not emotional, it was purely operational, a confirmation that the stealth integrity remained intact. The successful encounter provided a strange boost of confidence, a quiet, internal victory that fueled her continued endurance. She had been without food for 18 hours. The hunger was a gnawing, constant emptiness that added to the physical misery. She knew she had to eat to maintain the caloric expenditure needed to fight the cold, but eating risked sound, smell, and movement. She decided on a controlled, disciplined action. She slowly, painstakingly, brought a small, calorie-dense gel pack to her mouth, tearing the wrapper with her teeth to minimize sound, slowly sucking down the contents. This was not a moment of pleasure, but an operational requirement. She performed the action in 5 minutes of total concentration, treating the act of eating with the same professional severity as sighting a target. She then immediately sealed the wrapper and returned to absolute stillness. The cold began to advance past the point of numbness, moving toward deep, systemic pain. Her core temperature was dropping. Anya began the required countermeasures: isometric exercises, contracting and relaxing major muscle groups without external movement. She tensed her thighs, her abdomen, her glutes, a subtle internal tremor that generated necessary heat. She focused her mind on the feeling of warmth, visualizing the blood flow, utilizing a form of disciplined, internalized biofeedback. This was survival through sheer mental control, forcing the body to perform beyond its natural physiological capacity. She realized that her ability to endure was rooted in her understanding of the mission's profound significance. She was the one who would provide the targeting data for the operation that would save hundreds of lives. Her suffering was not personal. It was a necessary contribution to a far greater goal. This elevated purpose negated the authority of her pain. We do not suffer for the sake of suffering. We suffer to uphold the covenant of the uniform. This covenant was the moral foundation of her physical endurance, the absolute clarity of her commitment to the collective good.
She needed to use her long-range radio to transmit the collected intelligence, but the action required raising her head and partially uncovering her antenna, a high-risk move in the thinning morning light. She delayed the action, waiting for the cover of a patrol rotation she had mapped out. The discipline of patience was often the hardest to master, the internal conflict between the urgency of the mission and the necessity of security. She waited 10 agonizing minutes, observing the rotation, finding the exact 5-second window where the sentries would be at their maximum distance from her position. When the moment arrived, she moved with lightning speed, yet with perfect control. The movement was economical, precise, executing the pre-committed sequence of actions without a single wasted motion. She raised the antenna, transmitted the coded burst, and immediately dropped back down, covering the small disturbance in the snow with a flick of her hand. The entire sequence took 3 seconds. She then returned to the absolute stillness, her heart pounding not from fear, but from the massive, controlled exertion of the tactical maneuver. She was safe, and the intelligence was transmitted. The objective was 80% complete. She had to move now. The sun was fully up, and the cover provided by the long night was gone. Her secondary extraction point was 2 kilometers to the south, requiring a low-crawl retreat through dense, unforgiving brush. She performed a final, full observation scan, ensuring she had missed no detail that could compromise the main force. She spent 5 minutes visually clearing her immediate exit path, eliminating the possibility of being spotted during the vulnerable transition from static observation to tactical retreat. Discipline demanded the same meticulous attention to the end phase as to the initial infiltration. The low crawl was brutal. She used only her elbows and knees, keeping her body low to the ground, pulling her rifle and pack behind her. The injury to her hands from the initial hours of digging in the frozen earth was now raw and bleeding, the friction of the snow and gravel tearing at the skin. She ignored the constant scraping pain, focusing only on the rhythm of her movement, slow, deliberate, and relentless. The entire purpose of her survival was the secure delivery of the intelligence she carried in her mind. Every meter gained was an act of profound, grinding willpower. She reached the 1st kilometer marker, a massive, twisted pine tree, and allowed herself a 30-second rest, leaning her forehead against the cold, rough bark. She did not close her eyes. She scanned the area, maintaining her perimeter watch, refusing to accept the safety of the moment. She quickly reviewed the next kilometer of the route, mentally breaking it down into smaller, manageable sections of 50 meters each. The immense distance was broken into a series of small, achievable commitments. The discipline of the mind was in this decomposition of the overwhelming task into digestible pieces.
She pushed on, the cold now replaced by a burning, deep exhaustion that made every movement an act of agonizing choice. She was operating on pure, residual will, the mental state that overrides the physical collapse. She began to recite the phonetic alphabet backwards, a simple test to ensure her mental acuity remained uncompromised. When her tongue stumbled, she forced herself to restart, punishing the lapse with increased speed of movement. She refused to allow the psychological effects of fatigue to interfere with her professional execution. She was the commander of her own failing biology.
She saw the prearranged signal flash, a simple mirror reflection from the extraction team. Relief was a sudden, violent chemical surge.
but she suppressed the urge to rush forward. She maintained her low crawl, approaching the rendezvous point with the same caution she had maintained for the last 18 hours, scanning for secondary threats or enemy decoys. The moment of relief was often the moment of fatal error. She arrived at the location, giving the necessary challenge response code in a low, clear voice, her composure absolute despite the state of her body.
The extraction team leader, seeing her mud-caked, frozen form, simply nodded. Anya collapsed into the vehicle, the sudden warmth and safety almost overwhelming. She immediately gave her report, a 10-minute, detailed, precise download of all intelligence, stripped of any reference to her own suffering. She was cold, in pain, and utterly exhausted, but she was whole. She had fulfilled the covenant, achieved absolute stillness, and delivered the data. Her greatest victory was not against the enemy, but against the weakness within. She allowed herself to close her eyes, the silence of the successful mission a profound, earned reward. The geometry of stillness was complete.